The first bullet shattered his shoulder, the second ripped through his gut, the third, right between the eyes, ended everything. Detective Malik Rowe never even had time to reach for his badge. He was off duty, driving home, unarmed. 3 squad cars surrounded him as he turned down a quiet alley behind the precinct, the route he always took to avoid traffic. 3 white officers stepped out. No warning, no words, just guns drawn and rage barely caged behind uniforms. Get out of the fucking car. Before Malik could speak, they yanked him from the driver's seat, slammed him against the hood, and threw him to the ground. His mouth bled from hitting the pavement. He gasped, "I'm on your side." A boot crushed his ribs, then the gunshots. Muzzle flashes lit the night like camera flashes at a funeral. The last breath dragged itself from his throat, broken and bubbling with blood. "They know I was going to talk," he whispered, then silence. Officer Bell placed a rusted 9mm beside Malik's lifeless hand. Sergeant Rourke stared down at the corpse and muttered, "He gave us no choice." The third cop, the youngest, just turned away and vomited in the shadows. The alley filled with red and blue lights. Sirens in the distance. Miles away, an old man sat frozen in front of his TV. The words, "Unarmed off-duty cop killed in police standoff," crawled across the screen in his trembling hands. A dropped phone buzzed silently against his palm. Retired FBI profiler Elijah Rowe saw the blood-soaked footage, and for the first time in years he felt something deep, cold, and familiar crawl back into his chest. Vengeance. 6 days earlier, the morning light spilled softly through the cracked blinds, painting long golden stripes across the kitchen table. Bacon sizzled, coffee brewed, a faint Motown classic hummed from a dusty old speaker. Malik Rowe sat across from his father, elbows resting on the table, face lit with that same boyish grin he'd worn since he was 10. "Don't give me that look." Old man Malik chuckled. "I know you think I'm naive." Elijah raised a brow, stirring his coffee slowly. "Not naive, just too idealistic. You still think this job is about truth, justice," he sipped. "It's not. It's about survival." Malik laughed, shook his head. "You sound like every bit of vet who ever gave up trying." "I didn't give up," Elijah said, his voice calm but edged with something heavier. "I just realized the system doesn't care about good intentions." Malik leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. "That's the difference between you and me. I still believe it can be fixed." He paused. "There are things you don't know, Dad. Things happening in my department that shouldn't be." Elijah's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Like what?" Malik hesitated, as if weighing every word. "Let's just say some of the people I wear a badge with shouldn't be allowed near a gun, let alone a shield." He forced a smile. "But don't worry, I'm handling it." The retired profiler studied his son for a beat longer, reading the tension in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. "You're not a whistleblower, are you?" Elijah asked, more serious now. "Because I've seen how that ends. You think you'll be the exception." Malik stood, grabbing their empty plates and rinsing them at the sink. "I'm not suicidal, Dad. I'm just tired of pretending like I don't see it." He turned, the morning sun casting a warm halo behind him. "Someone has to speak up. Might as well be me." Elijah wanted to argue, wanted to grab his son by the shoulders and shake sense into him. But Malik wasn't a kid anymore. He was a man, a better man than he'd ever been. "Promise me one thing," Elijah said finally, voice softening. "Whatever you're doing, don't do it alone." Malik nodded, smile returning. "I've got people I trust." He poured himself another cup of coffee. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" The moment froze in time to generations of lawmen, one hardened by betrayal, the other still believing in the fight outside. The day bloomed into life. Birdsong, kids laughing on their way to school, a distant ice cream truck rolling down the block. Later, that day, Malik walked through his neighborhood, stopping to greet the barber, the mail lady, the single mom on the corner whose rent he'd quietly covered last winter. People loved him here not just because he wore the badge, but because he I'd mentored kids after school, talked kids out of gangs, took complaints seriously, never abused his power. To them, Officer Malik Rowe wasn't just law enforcement, he was hope. Back at home, Elijah sat alone, staring at the empty mug his son had left on the counter. Been something in Malik's voice, something that didn't sit right, a weight behind the optimism, a warning inside the laughter. That night, Malik sent a single encrypted email to someone named Reyes. Subject line, "It's time. Attached documents, video clips, internal reports. Body if I don't check in 72 hours, go public." Then he turned off the screen, exhaled slowly and looked at a framed photo of his late mother. Her words echoed in his mind, "You do the right thing even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous." He closed his eyes and whispered, I hope you were right. And the next morning he kissed his father goodbye, said we'll talk soon, smiled, and walked out the door into a world he no longer trusted, not knowing he had just 3 days left to live. The first file was easy to find. An arrest log from 2 months ago showed a man booked for drug possession, except the timestamp on the bodycam footage when recovered showed the arresting officer planting the evidence after cuffing the suspect. Malik stared at the video heart pounding. It was Officer Knox. He found more altered timestamps, sealed reports, disciplinary complaints that vanished from personnel files, and then the hardest to stomach footage from a no-knock raid. A woman's screams, her toddler crying in the background, the officers high-fiving in the hallway. One of them was Sergeant Bell. Malik downloaded everything to an encrypted drive. He paced his apartment, hands trembling with rage. This wasn't just a few bad apples. This was rot from the inside. That night he met with Maya Grant, a longtime friend, and an investigative reporter with the Sentinel. They sat in her parked car behind a quiet gas station. Malik handed her the drive. If anything happens to me, he said, this story runs. Maya studied him. You sure you want to do this? I have to. He looked out the window, eyes lost in thought. I can't keep pretending I wear the same badge as these bastards. She nodded slowly. Okay then, I've got your back. Bye. The next morning something felt off. Malik noticed a black SUV trailing him during his patrol shift. Parked 2 blocks down when he got coffee. Reflected in the side mirror when he stopped at a traffic light. Knox wouldn't meet his eyes. In the precinct, Rourke was unusually quiet. Bell greeted him like nothing was wrong, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. At his locker, Malik found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath his spare holster. No name, just a sentence scrawled in red ink. Keep your mouth shut, Rowe. He went to internal affairs. No one would see him. The receptionist said his appointment had been cancelled. His request to pull Bell's bodycam footage from the raid already reviewed and cleared, they said. Case closed. Malik stood in the hallway for nearly a full minute staring at the closed door, then walked out. He called Maya. It's starting, he said. They know. That evening he left the precinct late. He avoided the main roads, took the back route home, but he never made it. At 11:42 p.m. 3 squad cars cornered his vehicle in an alley behind the station. No witnesses, no body cams activated, just the red glow of brake lights bleeding into the darkness, and gunshots. The department's press release arrived hours later. Detective Elijah Rowe was killed during a routine traffic stop after resisting arrest. A loaded weapon was recovered at the scene. They released a blurry dashcam still. Malik standing outside his vehicle, arm raised, something metallic in his hand. They didn't release the footage of the 3 officers dragging him out of his car, or the sound of him begging them to stop, or the words he whispered as he bled to death. They know I was going to talk. The next morning, Elijah Rowe stood motionless in front of his television, still in his bathrobe. The morning news anchor repeated the official version of events. Sources say the officer became combative. A grainy photo appeared on screen. Malik's face frozen mid-motion, eyes narrowed, mouth open. They painted him as a threat, an aggressor, another angry black man who escalated the situation. Elijah didn't blink. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at the silence between words, at the lies that twisted his son's legacy into a headline. Then came the photo of the gun, rusty old A model his son never owned. The father's hands curled into fists. The coffee mug slipped from his grip and shattered on the kitchen tile. He saw it clearly now. Not just the injustice, not just the corruption, but the ritual, the system swallowing truth and spitting out stories. And this time it had swallowed his son. By sundown, protesters had gathered outside the precinct. Justice for Malik, say his name, end qualified immunity. But inside his apartment, Elijah sat in silence. He opened his son's encrypted laptop, cracked the password in 10 minutes, read every file, watched every video, listened to every recorded note Malik had left for Maya, and when he reached the last entry, a voice memo recorded just hours before his death, his hand shook as he hit play. If you're hearing this, they got me. Tell the truth. Don't let them bury me in lies. Elijah closed the laptop, stared into the darkness, and whispered they buried the wrong man. The wind screamed through the alleyway, colder than it had any right to be in early spring. Elijah Rowe stood where the blood had been scrubbed away. A puddle still lingered where the street sloped. Not blood now, but water grease runoff from the nearby storm drain. Still, he couldn't unsee it. His son face down, the angle of his limbs, the silence that followed the gunshots. It was just past midnight and he was alone. Not even the patrol cars passed by anymore. No cameras here, no streetlights, just shadows and silence. He knelt, Right here, he whispered. This is where they killed you. The words burned his throat. He heard movement behind a dumpster, a rat or a cat, or maybe just his imagination. But then came a whisper from the dark. They say he pulled a gun. Elijah turned, but no one was there. Another voice, this time behind him. They say he attacked them. He backed up, heart pounding, sweat chilled on his skin. The whispers grew louder, circling. They say he died a hero. They say he snapped. They say he was always too proud. They say nothing. They say nothing. They say shut up. Elijah roared into the night. The voices stopped, but only outside. Inside they remained. 2 days later he stood before a patch of fresh earth. No stone yet, just a temporary marker. Detective Malik Rowe, end of watch. His knees buckled as he lowered himself to the grave. I wasn't there, he said softly. His voice cracked. You came to me, you hinted at it, and I brushed you off. Told you to be careful, but I didn't press. He placed a trembling hand on the dirt. I should have known. I should have stopped you, or gone with you. He swallowed hard, bile rising in his throat. I trained you to be brave, but I never taught you how to survive the cowards. Internal Affairs closed the case in record time. Standard protocol, the report read. Officers acted within departmental policy. Suspect failed to comply with verbal commands. Use of force deemed appropriate. No mention of planted evidence. No mention of the missing dashcam audio. No interview with Maya. No mention of the file she submitted 2 days after Malik's death. Elijah read the summary over and over. Sitting in his dark living room with a bottle of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other, both old habits he thought he'd buried for good. He hadn't slept in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Malik's smile. Every time he opened them, he saw the muzzle flash. The nightmare started 3 nights after the funeral. He was in a burning house trying to reach Malik, who stood at the end of a hallway. Elijah, his son, would call, Dad. But every time Elijah got close, the hallway stretched longer, the flames swallowed the floor, and Malik turned away. Swallowed in smoke. He'd wake up soaked in sweat, the sound of gunshots ringing in his ears. The bourbon helped until it did. I didn't single quotes did. By the 5th night Elijah began to move. He returned to Malik's apartment, used the spare key he still kept on his old FBI chain. Everything was untouched. His son's scent still lingered faintly, cologne, detergent, a trace of coffee. He sat at the desk, opened drawers, read notes, passwords, access logs, timestamped entries. There were maps, photos, dossiers, names of officers, complaints, victims. One name appeared over and over again, Sergeant Clayton Bell, then Detective Rourke, then Officer Knox. In a hidden folder on Malik's laptop he found voice memos, dozens. He pressed play. Date, April 9th. I saw Bell take a duffel bag out of the evidence room today, no sign out. That's the 3rd time. April 12th. Talk to Officer Vega. She said she's afraid. Said Rourke threatened to make her disappear if she asked questions. April 13th. I don't know how far this goes, but it's not just corruption, it's culture. Ranks protecting ranks, cover-ups, planting dope, and worse. April 14th. If I die, tell my father I didn't go looking for trouble. I was just trying to do the right thing. Elijah clenched his jaw. He played the last memo again and again. Tell my father I didn't go looking for trouble. The next day, Elijah sat in his car across from the precinct. He watched Bell exit the building, laughing with a fellow officer. His stomach churned. He felt like vomiting, but not from sickness, from rage. He opened the glove box, took out a small black notebook. It was the one he used during field profiling days. He hadn't touched it in 12 years. He flipped to the first blank page and wrote, Target SGT, Clayton Bell. Pattern narcotics diversion, falsified arrest reports, known for manipulation, weakness, daughter, age 7, lives with ex-wife. He paused, then turned to a new page. Target, debt, Michael Rourke, military background, PTSD suspected, history of brutality, untouchable due to war hero status, weakness, ego, lives alone, no family, overconfident. Another page. Target officer Kyle Knox, young, impressionable, clean record, but connected. Weakness, fear, hell, crack. The profiler in him had awoken, but something else had awakened too. Something older, darker. He stared at the pages as if they belonged to someone else. I trained killers, he whispered. Now ill become. One. He dropped the notebook in his lap. This wasn't a case anymore. This was personal. This was war, at home. He opened a long-forgotten lockbox in his closet. Inside, an unregistered Glock, silencer, burner phones, a stack of blank license plates, multiple IDs, A photo of Malik as a boy, beaming in his little league uniform. Elijah traced the outline of the photo with his thumb. "I won't let them bury you in lies," he said. Then he stood, sober now, still, broken, but with something to do. They thought they'd killed the only one who cared. They were wrong, because Elijah Rowe wasn't just grieving anymore, he was preparing. And the clock had started ticking. Sergeant Clayton Bell stood on the steps of the 17th precinct, sunglasses on, tie loosened, posture relaxed, cameras flashed, microphones crowded his chest. He gave them the headline they wanted, the polished, grief-stricken tone of a department mourning a tragic incident. "We lost one of our own," Bell said, voice smooth, confident, practiced. Detective Rowe was a brother in blue, and while the circumstances are still under investigation, we urge the public to reserve judgment until all facts are known. The press nodded, scribbled, nodded again. Some even thanked him for the clarity. As they dispersed, Bell's smile faded. He walked briskly to his unmarked cruiser and shut the door. Alone now. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the wheel. Not from guilt, from fear. Because for the first time since they made Malik disappear, Bell wasn't sure they'd gotten away with it. His ex-wife met him at the front door, arms crossed. Their 7-year-old daughter ran to hug him. "Hi, Daddy," he picked her up. Buried his face in her hair, the scent, strawberries and sunscreen, grounded him. "I missed you, Bug," he whispered. At dinner he played pretend jokes, chicken nuggets, a bedtime story about dragons and brave princesses. But after lights out, he sat alone in the backyard, smoking. His hands didn't shake anymore. Head made peace with the choice. They were cornered. Rowe was going to go public. He was going to ruin everything, not just their careers, but the entire foundation of their world. It was him or us. He told himself that over and over, until the shadows whispered otherwise. Officer Kyle Knox couldn't sleep, not without pills, not without seeing Malik's face every time he blinked. Had been the lookout, the youngest, the quiet one. When they planned the stop, he thought they were just going to scare him, maybe rough him up, not kill him. He saw the blood. He saw how Rourke kept shooting even after Malik collapsed. He saw how Bell planted the weapon, eyes cold, hands steady, and he said nothing, did nothing, because they were senior, because they told him it was necessary, because when Bell said he was going to bury us, it felt true. Now every morning, he drove 90 minutes to visit his father in a rehab facility. Stroke survivor, barely able to speak. Kyle sat beside him, held his hand. "Did you have a good week?" the old man asked. Words slurred but smiling. Kyle nodded, lying. "Yay, Pop. Work's been steady." He didn't mention the nightmares, the nausea, the way he checked over his shoulder every time he left the house. He hadn't told anyone about the anonymous note he found under his windshield 3 days ago. "Truth bleeds, so will you." He threw it away, but the words stayed. Knox wasn't built for this, and he was starting to break. Detective Michael Rourke didn't believe in guilt, only consequences. His apartment was spotless. No photos on the walls, no keepsakes, just knives, medals, and a single, perfectly made bed. He showered at 5 a.m., trained for an hour, and arrived at the precinct before sunrise. Had seen war, Fallujah Ramadi, Helmand Province. Had watched friends die in pieces. Had shot men whose names he never learned. The rules were simple in war. You eliminate the threat, and Malik Rowe, with his holier-than-thou tone, his files, his press contacts, was a threat. You don't survive this world by being soft, Rourke muttered, sharpening a combat knife at his kitchen counter. You survive by deciding what you're willing to do. He hadn't flinched when they planned the stop. He hadn't hesitated when it came time to pull the trigger. He hadn't felt anything, until yesterday. A delivery envelope. No return address. Inside a printed photo of the alley where Malik died. A red X drawn on the spot where Rourke had stood. Nothing else. No name. No message. Just the X. He burned the envelope, but he felt the eyes. Someone was watching, and he liked it. The three men met once, privately, at an abandoned maintenance garage near the docks. No cell phones, no uniforms, just adrenaline and nerves. Bell lit a cigarette. You feel it too, right? Rourke nodded. Rowe's father, Hayes not stupid. Hayes ex-bureau. Exactly, Bell muttered. And Maya Grant, the reporter. She's been too quiet. I think she's waiting, planning. Knox stood near the door, arms folded. He looked thinner, pale. You think Hayes coming for us? He asked. Bell's eyes narrowed. I think something's coming. Rourke leaned in. Let him try. They weren't monsters. Bell loved his daughter. Knox wanted to save his father. Rourke believed in order, in discipline. in protecting the tribe, even if it meant crossing the line. But when it came time to choose between Malik Rowe's truth and their survival, they chose themselves. They justified it in different ways. Bell, we didn't start this. He did. He crossed the line, Knox. I just followed orders. I didn't even fire Rourke. You take out threats. That's what keeps the rest alive. But deep down, under the pride, the fear, the rationalizations, they all felt it. The breath on their necks, the silence that pressed too hard, the sense that something was building, coming slowly, patiently, deliberately, a reckoning, because justice doesn't always wear a badge, and guilt doesn't always wait for confession. Sometimes, it knocks, then bleeds, then buries, and none of them, not Bell, not Knox, not even Rourke, were ready for the man they'd awakened. Elijah Rowe hadn't worn a suit in years, not since retirement, not since his wife's funeral. Now, standing in front of the mirror, in a crisp black jacket, clean-shaven, eyes sharp, he looked like someone had buried long ago, someone dangerous. Quantico. Virginia private bar. Off the books, no surveillance. Jesus Christ, Elijah, said Tom Herrera, former intelligence liaison, sliding him a drink. I thought you were dead. I might as well be. Elijah took the scotch without blinking. But they made a mistake. They took the one thing that kept me human. Tom's face hardened. I saw the report. Official story stinks. Even from here. He leaned in. What do you need? Names, IP logs, internal affairs chatter, anything related to a cover-up in the 17th precinct. You think they buried it? No, Elijah said, voice flat. I think they erased it. Tom sighed. You know I can't give you bureau access, not anymore. I'm not asking for the bureau. He pulled a photo from his pocket. Malik, age 9, smiling in a backyard wiffle ball game. I'm asking for my son. There was a long pause. Then Tom nodded. I'll make some calls. Quiet ones. Back in D.C., Elijah turned his basement into a war room. Walls lined with red string maps, mug shots, newspaper clippings. At the center, 3 names in black marker: Rourke, Bell, Knox, each with their routines, addresses, known associates, psychological profiles. The profiler in Elijah had returned in full. He built patterns. Knox visited his father every Sunday morning. Bell dropped his daughter at school at 7:30 sharp, then hit the same cafe. Rourke was unpredictable to gym memberships, multiple vehicles, a paranoia pattern that told Elijah he knew someone might be watching. But it wasn't enough. He needed evidence. Hard proof. Through Tom's contact, Elijah learned of a clerk inside Internal Affairs who had flagged Moloch's file before it vanished, Agent Dana Costello. She worked late, never married, loyal but not blind. Elijah waited until she was alone walking to her car. I need a minute, he said, appearing from the shadows. She jumped, reached for pepper spray. I'm Elijah Rowe. She froze. Recognition, pity. I read your son's file, she said. I'm sorry what they did. I don't want your apology. I want access. I can't, she said. It's locked, triple encrypted. They sealed it under potential national security risk. That's a lie. She nodded. I know. Silence stretched. Then, she unlocked her phone, tapped a contactless key against his burner device. I never saw you. Elijah now had partial access to internal records. But it wasn't enough. The real files, body cam footage, disciplinary notes, hidden audio logs, were buried deep inside the precinct's evidence mainframe, accessible only by command staff. So he broke in, not with force, with familiarity. He knew how precincts ran. He waited for shift change, wore janitorial coveralls, bluffed a fake badge, passed through a side entrance. He moved like a ghost. In the server room, he plugged in a decryption drive Tom had given him. Data flooded the screen. Folders unarchived. And there it was. Bodycam_1703_bell_raid.mp4row_traffic_stop_alt_complaints_suppressed.xlsx. He downloaded everything, then slipped out unnoticed. Back in the basement, Elijah watched. First the raid, Bell kicking in the door, no warrant, a child crying, a scream, no weapon visible, then gunfire. The file was labeled clean. Elijah saw murder. Then the dashcam, Moloch's, hands up, voicecom/Knox's voice cracking, Bell screaming orders, Rourke's weapon drawn before a single word was spoken, then flashes, then Moloch's voice shaking. They know I was going to talk. Elijah's hands clenched the edge of the desk until his knuckles went white. This wasn't policing. This was an execution. He took the footage to Maya. Her hands trembled as she watched. Tears streaked down her cheeks. My God, she whispered. Run it, Elijah said. I want to. You know I do. But, she hesitated. My editor's already been pressured, threatened they'll kill the story. Maybe me too. He leaned forward. They already did kill my son. She met his gaze, saw something in his eyes she didn't like. Not grief, not rage, resolve. I'll keep it safe, she said softly. When you're ready. That night, Elijah stood before the wall of faces. Justice through channels blocked. The bureau had gone silent. The media would be crushed. The courts bought what was left. One word: retribution. He marked the first target in red. Officer Kyle Knox, the weakest link. He was unraveling, scared, still human, which made him dangerous and vulnerable. Elijah followed him for days, watched him fumble through patrols, talk to himself, cry after visiting his father, drink alone in his car. Then one night, Elijah left something on Knox's windshield, a flash drive, inside footage of the alley, Moloch's voice, Bell planting the gun, Rourke's cold eyes, and a message: you have one chance to confess. If you don't, you're first. Knox didn't sleep. He took sick leave, called Bell twice, tried to contact Internal Affairs, but no one called back. He drove to the alley, stood where Malik died, looked up at the rooftops, said nothing, then went home, and waited. Elijah waited too. Rooftop opposite Knox's apartment, scoped, breath steady, trigger untouched. If Knox confessed, he'd let him live. If he ran, he'd track him. But if he stayed silent, then the gun would speak. 3 nights passed. No statement, no confession, only silence. And as Elijah chambered the round, steadying his breath, he whispered, "You were the softest." His finger tightened. But then movement. Knox emerged from his apartment, envelope in hand, walking straight into a news van parked outside. Camera on, voice trembling. He held the mic. "I was there the night Malik Rowe was murdered." Elijah exhaled. His finger relaxed. Not spared, witnessed. The war had begun. The wall had cracked. 1 down, 2 to go. But Kyle Knox hadn't confessed. Not in time. He'd made the call. He'd met the reporter. He'd shaken through a trembling half-truth in front of a lens. But it wasn't enough. He hadn't handed over the files. He hadn't named names. He hadn't earned forgiveness. So, Elijah Rowe finished what he started. The scene was quiet. An old motel on the edge of the 495 Beltway. No guests, no cameras, just silence. Elijah picked the lock with surgical ease. Entered room 212 just past midnight. Found Knox curled up on the bed, whiskey bottle, half-empty TV, flashing static. He didn't fight. "Are you going to kill me?" Knox whispered, eyes red, breath shallow. Elijah said nothing. He only handed him a revolver. "I gave you a chance," Elijah said. Knox stared at the weapon. "I didn't shoot him," he said. "I swear to God, I just stood there. I didn't stop them, but I didn't. That's the problem," Elijah cut in. "You stood there." Knox lowered his head. "I can't live with it," he whispered. "I'm not asking you to." By sunrise, Knox was found slumped in the motel bathtub. Gunshot under the chin, single note beside the body: "I'm sorry, he deserved better." The department called it a suicide. Tragic, regrettable. They flew the flag half-mast for a day, then folded it back up. But inside the 17th precinct, tension cracked like bone. Sergeant Bell sat in his office reading the coroner's report. His hands didn't shake, but his gut twisted with something raw. He opened his desk drawer. Inside, a burner phone, already buzzing. "You think it's him?" Rourke's voice barked through the line. "It has to be," Bell muttered. No one else knew. What did Knox say before? Nothing, just silence, like he knew it was coming. Rourke exhaled. "On the other end, I'm hiring security." "Smart. And you?" Rourke asked. "I'm loading my gun," Bell said, then hung up. Elijah was watching. He followed Bell from a rooftop, tracked Rourke's SUV through to Burroughs, memorized every route, every stop, every weakness. But they weren't the only ones watching, because somewhere inside FBI headquarters, a digital flag had gone up. Knox's confession was analyzed. His connection to the Rowe case noted. The voice files recovered from Moloch's encrypted drive, already forwarded by Maya, had reached a closed circle unit. And Elijah Rowe's name surfaced again, a red dot on an old file. A retired profiler gone quiet, suddenly active. A pattern emerged. 3 officers involved, 1 now dead, 2 under private protection, and 1 grieving father who had once taught extraction, infiltration, and psychological breakdown to the Bureau's best. It wasn't a coincidence. Elijah didn't sleep. He trained. He ran drills in abandoned warehouses, tried on voices again, the cold, focused tone of an operator. He cleaned his weapons, slept with 1 ear open, but the thing that kept him awake wasn't fear of getting caught, it was doubt. Knox hadn't resisted, he hadn't begged. He looked ready to die, but maybe ready to change too. "Did I pull the trigger?" Elijah asked himself in the dark. Or did I just hand it to him? Does it matter? He tried to stop. For one night, he drove out to a lake, sat by the water, breathed. He opened his phone, Moloch's old messages, and there it was, a voicemail, unheard. Time-stamped 3 days before the shooting. He played it. Hey Dad, I know we've been butting heads about this stuff, but I want you to know I'm not afraid. I have to do this. Someone has to. I'm going to expose them. All of it if anything happens to me. Tell the truth, even if it kills you. Elijah closed his eyes. That was it. He wasn't turning back. The next morning he put on gloves. He broke into a parking garage 2 blocks from Belle's gym, planted a small device under the back fender of Belle's Tahoe, custom-built tracker, quiet, untraceable. He followed Belle to a second location, a woman's apartment, late 30s, single, a social worker. Belle knocked, smiled. She let him in. 10 minutes later they were laughing on the balcony. Elijah watched from the street, expression blank. Belle was rebuilding his image, dating again, holding babies, smiling for church photos, but underneath still the same man who broke doors, beat suspects, framed his son. That night Elijah reached out to his last trusted contact, Special Agent Raquel Vega, worked together on counter-terrorism sweeps. He'd once saved her life during an op gone wrong. She owed him, but not like this. They met in a garage beneath an abandoned DMV. Elijah, she said, seeing his face. You look like you haven't slept. In weeks. I haven't. You killed Knox, didn't you? He didn't answer. I know what they did to your son. I've seen the footage. Then you know why this has to happen. No, Vega said sharply. That's not justice. That's execution. He stepped closer. Tell me if it were your son, your blood, your life shattered. Don't, she snapped, eyes wet. Don't make me imagine that. Silence. She pulled out a file, slid it across the hood of the car. Unofficial, she said. They're watching you. You've got about a week before they move. He took the folder. Turn back, Elijah. Right now, you can still walk away. I already did once, he said. Didn't save him. 3 days later, a special FBI unit quietly opened an inquiry. Subject, Elijah Rowe. Status, unofficial. Observation only. Note, suspected vigilante activity. Ties to Rowe homicide. Monitor communications. Avoid public exposure. The walls were closing in, but Elijah was already on his next move. Day 10 since Knox's death. Elijah slipped into a city records building after hours, used old credentials, bribed a clerk, stole a layout of the 17th Precinct's secured evidence wing. He planned his next strike, not a bullet, a message. He broke in again, left something inside Belle's office drawer, Moloch's badge, the one they never returned, washed clean, wrapped in black cloth. Beside it, a note, still watching, still counting. Belle found it the next morning. His hands trembled for the first time in 20 years. Rourke, meanwhile, had transformed his apartment into a fortress. Motion lights, cameras, panic buttons. He stopped going to bars, moved routes daily, carried 2 arms. You see ghosts, his security detail joked. I killed a ghost, Rourke replied. And ghosts don't forget. Elijah wasn't reckless. He had no illusions of escape, no dreams of peace. He only had one mission now: make them feel it. Fear, regret, paranoia, and finally, consequence. He didn't care if he died. He just didn't want to die before they did. The system was resisting. The bureau was closing in. The city whispered his name in secret corners. And somewhere deep inside his old training, a final switch flipped. Elijah Rowe was no longer a profiler. He was the storm, and it was just getting started. The lake stretched wide and still, beneath a silver sky barely disturbed by the wind or the occasional cry of a distant loon. Clayton Belle's vacation home sat on a private slope in the woods. 2 stories, cedar, siding stone porch, the kind of place built to forget things. It was a quiet Friday night when Elijah reached the edge of the trees. The binoculars around his neck trembled slightly as he watched through the living room window. Belle was alone. Almost his daughter was there too, 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor watching cartoons. Belle stood in the kitchen pouring bourbon into a heavy crystal glass. He looked tired, not from work, from waiting. Elijah waited until the lights dimmed, until Belle tucked his daughter into the guest bedroom upstairs, until he stepped out onto the porch, lighting a cigarette, scanning the woods. That's when Elijah moved. The first shot hit the porch column, wood splintering inches from Belle's head. He dove behind the banister, glass shattering from his hand. You knew this was coming, Elijah's voice echoed from the trees. Did you think that badge would save you forever? Belle fired blindly into the dark. 3 shots all missed. I did what I had to do, he shouted. He was going to destroy everything we built. You built it on blood, Elijah shouted back. Belle crawled toward the edge of the house, making for the back. door, another shot rang out. This one cracked the window above his head. Inside, upstairs, a light flicked on, and then a scream. "Daddy!" Elijah froze. A small figure stood in the upstairs window, eyes wide with terror. She couldn't see him, not really, but she saw the flash, the noise, the chaos. She saw her father bleeding from the leg, crawling across the floor. He hesitated, breathing hard, scope steady, but finger shaking. Down below, Bell slammed the back door shut and vanished into the trees behind the house. Elijah cursed under his breath, sprinted down the slope, cut left through the brush. He didn't get far. A sudden blinding light hit his face, and the world exploded in noise. Flashbang. His ears rang. He fell hard, rolling down a muddy ridge, vision swimming. 2 men in tactical gear grabbed him, tased him once, a mistake. Elijah bit down, forced himself to move. His knife was in his boot. He slashed. 1 man screamed. The other hesitated. Elijah drew his pistol and fired once clean to the chest. The second dropped. The first limped off into the woods, howling, blood in his mouth. Elijah got back up. Bell was gone, but the trail, wasn't. He drove 3 hours through the night to D.C., bandaged his arm in an old safe house, changed clothes, switched plates, burned the bloodied gloves. He knew where Bell would go, to the one man who'd never run Rourke. The trap was waiting. Elijah pulled into the parking garage beneath a derelict train station mid-city. 4:37 a.m. Rourke's SUV was there. So was the bait. Bell slumped in the passenger seat, dead bullet in the temple. Neat, professional. A note taped to his chest. "You want the truth, come get it." And a GPS coordinate. Elijah followed it to a warehouse on the river. Abandoned brick and steel, one long hallway that echoed with every footstep. He entered slowly. A red light flickered in the corner. A camera. "Figured you'd come," Rourke's voice called from somewhere above. Elijah scanned the rafters, found him standing on the metal catwalk, armed, calm, dangerous. "You've been busy," Rourke said. "Knox, Bell, the files, the press leaks, all of it." "Just tying up loose ends," Elijah said. Rourke smirked. "You know, I respected your boy." Elijah's jaw tensed. He was brave, honest, idealistic, stupid. "You murdered him. I preserved the system. You protected yourself." Rourke shrugged. "Call it what you want." Elijah lifted his pistol. "I'm not here to debate. You think killing me will fix it?" Rourke's voice was steady. "You think they'll let you walk out of here? You're not a hero, Elijah. You're a ghost." "I don't want to walk out," Elijah said. "I just want the truth." He held up a small recorder. Say it for the world." Rourke smiled, and said it. "I killed your son." He stepped into the light. "Because he was going to ruin us. Because he thought justice was bigger than loyalty. Because he forgot one rule: protect the badge." The words echoed. Elijah clicked the recorder off, and lowered the gun. Rourke's brow furrowed. "You're not going to do it." Elijah looked at him, really looked. A man broken by belief. A soldier without a war. An animal convinced the cage was the world. "You were never worth the bullet," Elijah whispered. He turned away. Rourke raised his gun, but too slow. Elijah spun, shot him through the shoulder, then the thigh. Rourke dropped, gasping, bleeding, coughing. Elijah walked over, kicked the weapon away, and crouched beside him. "You won't die yet. You'll live long enough to confess again." On tape, on camera, in court. Rourke laughed, coughing blood. "You're no different than us now." Elijah stared at him. Then after a long pause whispered, "I know." He raised the gun, and pulled the trigger. Outside, the river moved slow and black, reflecting the pale dawn. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Elijah stood alone in the warehouse, smoke drifting from the barrel, his hands steady, his chest empty. He walked out into the light, recorder in hand, blood on his boots, no badge, no backup, no absolution, but the truth, finally, and the cost of it paid in full. Elijah stood alone in the morning light, smoke still curling from the muzzle of his pistol. Rourke's body slumped beside the blood-spattered wall, the final name on the list. The tape, his confession, clutched in Elijah's shaking hand. No sirens, no applause, no redemption, just silence. It took the police 6 hours to find him. He didn't run, didn't hide. He sat calmly on the steps of the warehouse, hands resting. On his knees, the recorder placed gently beside him. When they cuffed him, he didn't flinch. When they read him his rights, he said nothing. But by then the tape had already been sent. The leak hit social media first. A 2-minute clip, Rourke's voice, his confession, no edits, no spin. "I killed your son because he was going to ruin us. Because he thought justice was bigger than loyalty." By nightfall, the streets were on fire. Protests erupted in every major city. D.C., Atlanta, Chicago, L.A. Thousands marched with Moloch's face on signs. Candles flickered beneath murals. Chants echoed across bridges. "Say his name." Justice for Malik Rowe. The system failed. The father didn't. The 17th precinct collapsed overnight. 3 officers resigned. 2 more were suspended. An internal audit reopened over a dozen sealed misconduct cases. Sergeant Bell's prior record leaked excessive force harassment complaints, wrongful arrests, all suppressed, all documented. The mayor called for reform. The police chief stepped down. And in the middle of it all, Elijah Rowe sat alone in a concrete cell. The bureau tried to control the narrative. They labeled him rogue, unstable, a vigilante who took justice into his own hands. But the footage kept spreading. The public wasn't interested in damage control. They wanted the truth. And they already had it. Raw, bloody human. Elijah said nothing during interrogation. Not to the U.S. Marshals, not to the FBI, not to the press. They asked about Knox, about Bell, about the warehouse. He stared through them like ghosts. His silence became the loudest voice in the room. In prison they kept him isolated. Not for punishment, for protection. Half the guards wanted to shake his hand. The other half wanted to beat him. He slept for hours a night, trained in the corner, read the same dog-eared book over and over. But most of all, he thought about Malik, about the years he wasted chasing protocol while his son believed in people, about how it took losing him to finally understand him. Letters began arriving after the first week, from mothers, sons, widows of cops, ex-cons, teachers, children who had watched his story online. Some were scrawled in crayon, some typed in formal language, but they all said the same thing: thank you. You did what no one else would. You gave us hope. He didn't respond, but he read every one. News anchors debated nightly: was Elijah Rowe a murderer or a martyr, a terrorist, or a father? Some called him dangerous, unhinged, a threat to law and order. Others called him brave, moral, the last honest man in a broken world. A bill was introduced in Congress, bearing Malik's name, the Rowe Reform Act, an attempt to increase federal oversight of police departments with a history of misconduct. It stalled in committee, but the protests didn't. Weeks passed. Elijah's trial loomed. His lawyer begged him to speak, to show remorse, to plead insanity, to explain why he did what he did. He refused. This isn't about my redemption, he said. It's about my son's name. In his cell one evening, the warden handed him a package. Inside, a photograph. Malik at age 5, gap-toothed smile, a toy badge clipped to his shirt, proud, pure, the kind of boy who wanted to protect the world. Before the world taught him to fear it. Elijah stared at it for a long time. That night he cried. Not for guilt, not for what he had done, but for the truth his son never got to see. The justice he had to steal. The legacy built not in peace, but in ashes. Final scene. The prison is quiet. A storm brews outside. Elijah sits on the edge of his cot, gray jumpsuit hanging loose on his shoulders. Wrinkles deepen across his face, but his eyes are sharp. In his hand, the photograph. He runs a finger across Malik's smile. Then softly, more to himself than anyone else, he whispers, I did what you couldn't. I made them pay. The words hang heavy in the room. And as thunder rolls in the distance, tears slip down Elijah Rowe's cheeks. Not of regret, not of victory, but of love. Exhausted, brutal, unconditional love. The storm outside breaks, and somewhere, beyond the bars, beyond the fences, the world begins to change.